this is Kyle, also known as Alien Dude, reviewing today the Günther messer made by Landsknecht Emporium. A couple things you should know right off the bat. These are review samples. I did not pay for them. Landsknecht Emporium reached out to me, asked me if I wanted to review one of their swords. I said sure. And they ended up sending me both the blunt and the sharp version of these swords. And you should also know the price of them. The sharp is 535 euros, which works out to about 625, if I remember right. And the blunt is 355 euros, which is around $415. And that does not include shipping from, I don't remember what country off the top of my head they're based in, but it's Europe. And if you're shipping to America, there's probably tariffs involved there as well. So I don't know exactly what price you would have to pay to get one of these. The sharp one is kind of a blinged up version of the Günther, whereas the blunt one is pretty much the base version with their base wood, whereas the sharp one has the antler handles and the CC1 pommel, which is the primary reason for the grip difference, length difference here. Talk about that in just a minute. The other thing you should know, I enjoy messers. I don't know how to use them particularly. I am not trained in their use at all. And I'm going to refer to them as swords. Messer means knife. If you want to get into that, feel free to make a comment about how it's not a sword, it's a knife. I know, they're swords to me. I'm going to call them swords. Throughout this review, I'm probably going to focus a little bit more on the sharp one because it's more where my interests lie, but I will definitely talk quite a bit about the blunt one as well. So let's take a look at the hilt. We'll start with the blunt one. This is the beech wood grip, and it has 4 pins in it. They look like they're bronze. They could also possibly be brass, and they are hollow, so you can see right through them. The overall shape is longer than the sharp one, and I'll talk about that in just a moment when I get to the sharp one. This is something you're going to see throughout this review and pretty much any review of Landsknecht Emporium products. They have a very handmade look to them, a very, I don't want to say rough, because while there is definitely some roughness there, there's a lot of refinement while still being rough. It's rough, but it is functional, and there's a lot of care and attention to making sure all the bits and pieces are functionally correct, and then not worrying too much about how they look after that. And if that bothers you, it's going to bother you throughout the entire sword, because it is very much true of all of Landsknecht Emporium's products that I have seen, at least. And I believe they do this to keep the price down, because that final finish takes a good amount of time and effort, and therefore would add cost. But it also could just be that they like this look. It's their choice to make, and they've gone with the choice they've gone with. There is not a pommel on the blunt one. It's rather that the grip follows into that classic hook shape or beak shape on there. And the interesting thing is it starts quite narrow here and then widens out towards that. And every corner, every edge is very nicely smoothed over. There's absolutely no hot spots at all. I do have some thoughts on how this handles, and I'll talk about that when I actually start picking up the swords and show you what I mean. The crossguard is quite short. It is quite stout, though. It is not a delicate crossguard, that's for sure. It's not overly thick, but it is a good-sized crossguard that you feel like you would be able to use it to help protect your hand. There is a nagel. I don't remember the correct pronunciation. I apologize for that. Right there, it is also quite robust. It angles back over the knuckles just a little bit, and it has a very robust peen on the opposite side of the guard. It is solidly put in place. Now, the sharp one, obviously a very different grip, and that's because it has both the antler scales and then the CC1 pommel option. And the pommel is my belief is why it is a much shorter grip than the wood, because this pommel is metal. It's going to be considerably heavier than the wood beak on the blunt one, or the base Günther. So if you're going to add this much weight back here, you can either, it's going to mess with the balance of the sword, right? So if you shorten the grip, it changes the lever points and keeps the balance where they want it to be. And it works. I will talk about the balance point and how it moves around and everything later, but it absolutely works here. The antler grips, this is something I tend to not be a huge fan of, both in looks and in feel. But man, did Landsknecht Emporium knock it out of the park here. This feels amazing. And what's interesting is this is a right-handed sword, obviously, because the nagel goes over the hand wielding it. This part of the grip is curved, so it rests in the palm. And this part of the grip is kind of indented a little bit, so my fingers rest naturally in it. I don't know if that was intentional or happy coincidence, but man, does it work. It really rests in my hand beautifully. And again, there's no hot spots here. Now, you do have a natural material here in antler, which is going to expand and contract with humidity and weather and all that. So there are some, I can feel the nagel, or not the nagel, the tang in a few spots, but I haven't had any hot spots there yet. So far, it seems good. The pins here are also look like bronze, and you can tell that they have that same handmade nature. I'm not going to go into that too much. And the crossguard and nagel are identical, really, to the blunt one, so there's not really much point in talking about them separately. So overall, the grips are phenomenal. They both look really, really cool. Very iconic look. I'd say this one is a little bit more iconic to a messer, to what I think of a messer, but this one is certainly not ahistorical at all. They definitely, there's a lot of messers that had a lot of bling to them. So adding antler grips, that makes sense. Moving on to the blades, let's talk about the sharp one first. It starts at 4.5 millimeters thick and has a lot of distal taper down to about 2 millimeters thick at the sweet spot. That is a outstanding geometry for cutting because it gets very thin right where you want to be cutting. The overall shape is absolutely gorgeous. I love the look of this one. Landsknecht Emporium lists it as a Elmsley type M3D falchion, and I will put up on screen what Elmsley's depiction of what a 3D is. The finish on the blade is, again, if you're looking at Landsknecht Emporium, it's not a perfect finish. It's not Albion level, but it's also not bad at all. It is quite smooth and actually better than I was expecting at this price point, and better than I was expecting from what I've seen of Landsknecht reviews and that kind of thing. It is a very attractive sword. There is some very, very light rippling in the surface, but we are talking incredibly minor, nothing deep at all. And there is a secondary bevel on here. It is not large. It is well done, and it is crazy sharp. We'll get to sharpness in just a minute. The blade is overall actually quite well done. And while I'm talking about it, it weighs 1 pound, 15 ounces, and the blunt one is 1 pound, 14 ounces. So they are both quite light swords. The blunt one starts a little bit thicker at 5.5 millimeters and gets down to 2.5 millimeters out at there's not really a sweet spot on it, but where the sweet spot would be. I mean, I guess there is. The sweet spot's generally the center of percussion on the blade, and there's going to be a center of percussion on there, just you're not going to cut with it. So it starts thicker, it stays a little bit thicker throughout, and then the edge is very thick. It is around a 2 millimeter thick edge, if I remember right, and out towards the tip, it swells even thicker. So the tip is quite blunt and rounded over. Now, I don't know if this is something that could be sparred with. That's far outside my area of expertise, but it is certainly an excellent training tool just for practicing form, practicing cutting through the air. I can get some sword wind with it, which surprised me when I was practicing with it, because that thick of an edge, I didn't think I was going to get sword wind, but it's actually quite a useful training tool. In fact, it has become my training tool for single-handed swords, mostly just practicing the basic cuts and that kind of thing, because it works really well, it moves very well, and it is light at 1 pound 14 ounces, so I'm not straining myself when I'm just trying to practice basic techniques. So the blunt one is, like I said, it's a little out of my area of expertise, but I like it quite a bit, and the blade basically shares some of the same characteristics as the sharp. The finish looks about the same. There are a few different spots, especially on the edge, where it's a little scuffed up and has a few flaws in the finish, but these are very minor. And if you were going to use this as a blunt sparring tool, it's going to get a lot more defects and mars to the edge than that. Let's do a quick paper cutting test so I can show you how sharp it is. Super easy to do that. I neglected to mention earlier there is a full false edge here, both on the clip and back here. The transition is beautiful. It starts right about here and thins into a very nicely done false edge. And it is sharp enough to cut paper, especially right there. The clip feels like it might be a little bit less sharp, but we're talking very minor. That is crazy sharp for a false edge, and it's going to make for a very good false edge cutter. So let's talk about the cutting. Wow, does this sword ever cut, and cut beautifully. I only did water bottles in the backyard. It's been too hot to do tatami. I would like to do tatami with this, but it's been too hot. It's starting to cool down, so I'll be able to do tatami pretty soon. But right now I only have 2 mats rolled, and I need those to practice for upcoming Fright Fight event, so I won't be able to get tatami with this yet. I am probably going to, even though I've already reviewed this, I am probably going to cut tatami with it at some point, because wow, does it ever cut water bottles amazingly well. I did effortless cuts, clean cuts, silent cuts, zero distance cuts. I did false edge cuts, and something I'm terrible with, especially with an arming sword. Nothing gave this any problem at all. This sword is an absolute joy to do backyard cutting with, and I suspect it's going to be one of the best tatami cutters I've had my hands on. I think it is going to give my Atrim falchion a run for its money in terms of best cutting sword I've ever used. This sword cuts and cuts and cuts and is just an absolute joy. All right, let's talk about handling for a little bit, and I've already kind of touched on it a little bit here and there. I love the way this sword handles. I pick it up. Every time I pick it up, I'm just like, oh, wow, that feels so good. Just picking it up and like, man, this just moves and flows exactly how I want it to. It feels so intuitive. I pick it up and I feel like almost anybody's going to be like, wow, that feels good in the hand. Real quick, I should look at point of balance. That looks like it's right around 3 to 3.5 inches, maybe up to 4. And there is some flex to it. You can probably see that. And the sweet spot's right around here. You look at gotta be very careful because the false edge is very sharp as well. There's a decent amount of flex. It's not a particularly thick sword, and that's what makes it so light at 1 pound 15 ounces. This feels like the perfect sidearm, quick, easy to deploy defense, something that you could wear around town if you were in medieval Germany or something like that. And just, I love the way this handles. It has the perfect amount of authority in the cut. It has a little bit of blade presence out here, but not a lot, but just enough to help guide you through the cut. And it just moves so well. I'm gushing here. I've been gushing throughout this whole review pretty much. And there's a reason for that. This sword is gush-worthy. It is a joy to pick up and handle. The grip fits into my hand very well. It locks into my hand. I cannot twist it at all. There is the slightest bit of I won't say a hot spot, but this part of the nozzle could kind of bite into the finger just a touch. If I'm bumping my hand all the way up, I can either just move my hand down a little bit, or I could probably just take a file and smooth these corners over the slightest bit, and that would make it a little bit more comfortable for me. But it's not even a hot spot. I've choked up on the sword like this, and I've cut with it, and it has not bothered me. It's just when I'm kind of moving it around there, I feel that the base of the noggin just kind of saying, hey, I'm here. So that is the most incredibly minor complaint I have with this sword across the entire review, and it is so minor it's not even worth talking about hardly. The blunt one, I pick it up. It doesn't have that immediate oh my god feel, but I pick it up and it's not very far off. The biggest difference between how the blunt feels and how the sharp feels is the grip. It gets considerably more narrow here on the blunt than it does on the sharp. And I don't know how well that's going to be picked up, but it does, and it affects my grip a little bit. See, I can twist it just a little bit, not very much. And all I have to do is choke down to about there. And now I can't twist it. It's just a little bit too narrow right up here for my hand, for the way I grip a sword, that it doesn't quite work for me. I do really want to move it down to about there. And now it's locked in the hand. And I pick this up. Let's look at the balance point real quick. It's a little bit further out. We're talking maybe like 4.5 inches. So a half inch to an inch further out than the sharp. It's more rigid, which does make sense because it is thicker overall, but it's still got quite a bit of flex to it. And it's a little bit lighter than the sharp, also at 1 pound 14 ounces. I attribute that to the fact that there's no pommel here, and really that's probably about the primary difference there. I mentioned this earlier, but I actually can get sword wind out of the sword, which surprises me. It doesn't mean I'm going to get it here, especially because I have a table out here. I don't think I'm going to be able to swing to get it, but no, I was able to hear it there. Hopefully you were as well. I wasn't even going particularly fast there because I didn't want to hit the table. Even though with the blunt, it's not going to do damage to the sword. It's a really effective tool for practicing my forms. I mentioned this before, I've actually, when I want to do just basic arming sword practice, I've actually started grabbing this sword because it fits well, it moves well, it's light, and it works. I can do basically anything that I want to do with an arming sword. This will do. I could even do false edge with it. I could do it with the sharp one, and I could do it here. So this actually works pretty well as an arming sword training tool. How do they compare to each other though? So like I said, pick this one up right away, just immediate. Wow, that feels good. Let me pick up one and pick up the other in short succession. I may not be talking during this. So this one, they feel very similar. This one does have a little bit more weight out towards the tip, which makes perfect sense. It's got a much thicker edge there, and the tip swells out quite a bit. So there's more weight out here. That makes perfect sense for a blunt, but they still feel remarkably similar. Yeah, this one's a little bit faster and quicker to move around, but we are talking very minor differences when you consider that this is a sharp, that's a blunt, very different hilt, grip lengths and all that. They still feel remarkably similar. I definitely prefer the way this one feels, but the blunt is no slouch either. All right, bottom line. The sharp messer in this configuration costs $625 approximately before shipping and taxes and tariffs and all that stuff. And the blunt is $415. Are they worth those prices? The sharp, oh my God, yes. This is one of my absolute favorite swords I own now. It is a joy to pick up and handle. It is a joy to cut with. It is gorgeous. I absolutely love this sword, and I feel like it is underpriced for what it is delivering. I would pay $1,000 for that sword without question. It is amazing. I love it. And if you don't own something from Landsknecht Emporium and you want something from them, if you want to see what they're about, if you want a messer like this, I cannot recommend this highly enough. Holy crap, is it an amazing sword? Yes, $625 is not a cheap price, but it is absolutely worth it. The blunt one, I have to bring that back just a little bit. It's not quite as I'm not quite as exuberant over it as I am about the sharp. Now, I still do really, really like it. I think it is an absolutely phenomenal training tool. It is my go-to when I want to pick up and just swing a sword to, maintain practice, work on edge alignment, work on accelerating the tip, maintain my form, all that kind of stuff. It is an absolute great tool for that. And at $415, that is not a bad price. I do have some slight reservations, especially about how the grip is not perfect for my hand, right where I normally would want to grip it, like I had just mentioned a little bit ago, but I can adjust where I grip it. It doesn't really make the handling of it much worse at all. And that's just my personal taste, and I can probably get used to it, even if I even if I couldn't adjust where my grip is, I could probably get used to it. But since I can, it's really not that big of a deal. It is an outstanding blunt sword. It's not something I have a lot of experience with, but I really enjoy it. I think it is a very good sword at the price. $415 is really not that terrible of a price at all. It's just a little bit above budget sword. Now, again, I don't know if you can spar with it. I don't know if it's legal for that. I don't know if it's safe for that. It's so far outside my area of expertise that I don't even want to speculate on that. If you want to know if it is something that you could actually enter a messer competition with, talk to the people running the competition. They will have a much better idea. But I can say it is a pretty damn good sword at $415. It's just not quite up to the level of the sharp one, which to me is honestly might be the best bargain in my entire collection. I think it's only really rivaled by the Balor Arms Knights Templar Arming Sword, which is also a phenomenal sword at a phenomenal price. I like this one even more. This is just an amazing bargain. Buy one if you are interested in this kind of sword. And that's going to wrap up this gushing review. I want to say thank you to Landsknecht Emporium for sending me these swords. I greatly appreciate it. They have a prized spot in my collection now. Thank you for watching, and until next time, Alien Toot out.